The majority of churches in the world today do this wrong. They approach faith wrong, they read the Bible wrong. They're looking for proof, they're insisting that they can prove literal truths, and they're doing it wrong. They misinterpret faith. And believe it or not, according to the Gospel of John, Jesus agrees with me. So that's what we're talking about this week.
Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching.
Hello all. Welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live, but pre-recorded from my front room, aka Kindred Studio A. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor of Kindred UMC.
My name is Ann, and I'm the treasurer for Kindred UMC.
My name is Ryan, and I'm HR for Kindred UMC.
SPRC, yeah.
There we go.
What you fulfill the role of HR.
Okay.
This is Jonah down here. He's probably going to take a poop because he's an old man and he can't control his butt. So we are in the series I'm calling Poster. It means post-Easter. Get it?
Yeah, I like it.
Don't quit your day job.
This is my day job. So we are taking a look at the encounters of the risen Christ in the Gospels after Jesus was crucified and came back from the dead. We took a look at Mary Magdalene. My schedule is so weird I can't remember what was released last time. This time we're going to look at good old Doubting Thomas. Doubting Thomas. So first of all, before we read anything, what do you know? What have you heard? What is your impression of Doubting Thomas? And do you know, if anything?
Go ahead.
I don't.
Okay. Right. Okay.
I cheated because I actually watch and go over it myself.
Oh, you had
last
to watch.
week.
Yeah, you had to watch the video I've already released about it.
No, I watched last week and then I read the whole chapter, and Thomas is at the end of it. So,
yeah.
Ha. But
nerd, you Bible nerd.
yeah, no.
They didn't tell me what we were talking about, so
I did tell you. I told you.
When?
You asked when you got here. I told you hours ago.
When I got here.
I told you
just
hours
did something
ago.
Before this.
I told you hours ago.
Oh, because I was just playing with my. Yeah. Anyways.
Whoa, where was that going? Whoa.
I was twiddling my thumbs. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. And that's why we do the live show after 7.
Right. Yeah. That's why we have the disclaimer at the beginning.
But I do remember from being a kid, and but it did remind me, he was the one who wanted to touch. He wouldn't believe till he touched Jesus' hands where the nails went through.
Yeah.
That was
Fun
the big
fact,
thing.
because there's just a lot of facts about this. The Gospel of John, which is where the Doubting Thomas story is the only one to even mention nails in the hands, or the word nails at all. That's not actually. I don't want to get too gruesome, and because I don't like to talk about the details of violence against other people. It keeps me up at night. But there were no nails in the hands or the wrists at all. That's not how Romans. People have a very wrong idea of what crucifixion looked like in their heads.
That's interesting because I've always heard it that way, and that was my understanding.
Yeah, so this is also something important to note. The writer of John, he never identifies himself as John. The writer does not identify himself. He constantly refers to the disciple, John the son of Zebedee, as the beloved disciple. And so there became a tradition in the early church that this was written by John, the follower of Jesus. In fact, it was written decades later. He almost certainly would have been dead by the time this was written. John, so we just call him John, even though he doesn't identify himself as John. One of the reasons that the nails thing matters is because it's evidence that, John wasn't there. He doesn't know how Romans crucify people because he wasn't at the crucifixion. He didn't see it happen. He was not a witness to any of these things. This was written at least 50 years after Jesus was crucified, probably more than that. So,
I think you just ruined half the arts and crafts that we did with the youth group as children for Easter. I just want you to know that.
They never put any nails in Jesus's hands or wrists. The Gospel of John is the only place that even references it, and historical evidence indicates that they used ropes. So like what they would do is, you know, when, all right, I'm gonna, for those of you who are triggered, by all means skip ahead. I don't like talking about this stuff either, but it's historically relevant. The way that crucifixion actually happened is, so when Jesus carries his cross, he's carrying a cross beam. It's one beam. And that's what they would march them to the hill. Then they would raise that they would tie their hands on the back. So like, if this was the cross beam, your hand would go like that. And then they would tie you there. Then they would hoist you up, affix wood was a precious commodity, so they would reuse the crossbeam over and over again. So they would hoist you up, affix the crossbeam to a cypress tree, and then they would, it gets gross, they would nail your feet from the side. You would be like splayed, your legs would be on each side of the cypress tree, and then they would nail in through the side.
Oh.
Then the way that people died from crucifixion was asphyxiation, because you can't breathe without lifting yourself up. And eventually you get exhausted, you can't lift yourself up anymore, and you suffocate. That's going to come into play because one of the other things that in the scripture we're about to read is the wound of the side. The wound of the side is they would, in order to test to see if the person has actually fully asphyxiated, is they would stab them with a spear through their lungs, and if it bleeds red, that means that you're bleeding. If it bleeds clear, and in the scriptures they talk about it bleeding water, it's clear bodily fluid, and it's because your lungs have filled up with fluid and you've asphyxiated. That's how crucifixion actually kills you. So gruesome details over, but those are the details of like how it actually happens and how it actually works. All that to say, John clearly wasn't there. He doesn't know the details, and that's why he makes a big deal out of the nails and the wounds in the hand or wrist, because he doesn't understand how crucifixion actually happens according to Roman practices. Wow. So John didn't write John. We are going to still look at, even though he wasn't like the follower of Jesus, son of Zebedee, he was one of the most prolific and important theologians. So I don't say that to discredit his gospel. I say it to give us the proper mindset when we read it. We're not asking ourselves, why did Jesus do this? What happened when it happened? We're asking ourselves, why does the writer of John, who is one of the earliest, most faithful evangelists for the gospel, tell the story this way? Especially when there are other gospels that tell the story differently. So John's making intentional creative choices to get a certain thing across, and that's what we're looking at. So this is from the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 19 through and this is actually the real ending of the Gospel of John. In our Bible, it goes on for another chapter. That was another writer, and you'll be able to hear the ending of the Gospel when I read it. You'll be like, oh yeah, that's clearly the ending of the Gospel. And then there's another chapter that somebody else wrote, different vocabulary, different cadences, different, it's clearly an appendix. Anyway, 19. And this is the day of Jesus' resurrection. So appeared to Mary Magdalene. Everyone's like, what? He's alive? What? So, okay. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, Sunday, and the doors of the house were where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." This would become, and had by the time that John was writing this gospel, "Peace be with you" was like a greeting that was kind of like thick and full of meaning. So he's using them. It's like you can hear how kind of meta this is.
Interesting that meaning of that, because you know what the exact translation of that is in Arabic.
No, what?
Peace be with you. Salam alaik.
Oh yeah, salam. Yeah, It's so shalom.
With all of you.
So you may have heard in Hebrew shalom. That's the same word, salam. You know, salam alaik. Like shalom is peace be with you in Hebrew, and so yeah, we're all people of the books, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The 2 wounds. He didn't have any wounds in his hands, but whatever. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." For some reason, send and send are 2 different Hebrew words, but whatever. When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." We're not going to talk about that because it's way too thick, and we'll be here for like 45 minutes. And I'll do a video about it some other time or something because it's so thick, but let's just overlook that part for now. But Thomas, poor old doubting Thomas. Thomas, who is called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hand," the only time the word nails is in any of the Gospels, "unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger in the mark of the nails in and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Salam alaikum." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here in my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Yahweh Elohim, which is a title. Anyway, Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." Now listen, this is the actual ending of the Gospel of John. "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name." Can't you hear the ending of that? Like, that's clearly the ending. But then somebody writes another chapter. Anyway. So, first of all, what do we make of Thomas? Like, let's sum it up for the folks at home. What'd you hear? And I'll help you.
What I make of Thomas?
Well, and just generally, like, what happened in the story.
He holds clear to his name, Doubting Thomas. So.
Well, and that's why they call him Doubting Thomas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you to eat the mic? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll eat the mic for you. You're good. I mean, he was skeptical, right?
Right.
And he wanted to see the actual wounds.
Yeah, I would have called him FOMO Thomas.
Yeah.
Because he like misses out. Everyone else is there when Jesus appears and he's not. And he's like, "What? No, I'm not gonna believe that." And and like you can understand why.
I mean, do you think that his skepticism isn't founded? I mean, he.
No, I completely. I think that's why John includes this character in the story. So again, let's remember, who is John actually writing to? So this is like at the earliest. This is like 80 A.D. CE. This is like 50 years after the resurrection. So who is he actually writing to? It would be like a church that's already started.
Yeah.
Like he's writing to people who already are involved in a Jesus community. Now here's the thing. There were no real Christians at this point. They were all Jews. They were still going to synagogue every day. There just happened to be some Jews who believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and some Jews that didn't. So they're all like members of the synagogue, and that's so John is writing to like the early church, but the early church doesn't even really exist yet. Here's the thing, though. Some synagogues started to kick out Christians before they were called Christians. So nobody knows, but a lot of scholars suspect that this was written to a church in Ephesus because of John is actually the most anti-Semitic gospel, which is a weird thing to say about a guy who identifies as Jewish. But he's has the most Jesus against the Jews and against the people in power, and that's probably because he was writing to a group of Christians who had been excommunicated from the synagogue. And there's a tension about, hey, you can come back to the synagogue, all you have to do is renounce Jesus, or you can stay out there and not participate in like the main central social aspect of everyone's lives. So John's writing this gospel, and it says there at the end, I wrote these things down so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Blessed are the people who haven't seen Jesus and still believe. Like, you can hear what he's trying to get at. He has an agenda here. He's trying to prevent the Jews who had claimed Jesus from renouncing Jesus so that they can go back to the synagogue. So he's like, hold to your faith. Don't just give up because you got kicked out. Like, we can still do this thing. You know, like, there's kind of that element. So there's a little bit of that, like, that's what's going on with and that's why he includes this Thomas character. Thomas doesn't believe. And then Jesus proves himself, and then Thomas believes, but then Jesus says, blessed will be the people who don't see me and yet they still believe. How does Jesus prove himself? Because I think this is one of the most important things about John's theology.
That's one question I was going to ask, because you said then Jesus comes in.
So
stop there.
What proof does Thomas demand? He says, I won't believe unless what?
He can put his hands on the wound.
Right. So how does Jesus prove himself? By his woundedness. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't that something? You know? The way that the Messiah proves his deity-ness is his humanity. Like...
Yeah, because I mean, like, I used to think about that as a kid, like, but you're like, you've risen, like, you get to, well, I guess not quite yet, huh? But like, you're better now.
He's risen.
You know?
He hasn't ascended.
Yeah. But like, oh, but you're better now, right? Like, it's all gone.
And we compare this to the story we did last week, I think, about Mary Magdalene, where he says, don't hold on to me, I haven't ascended yet.
Right.
Like, something's radically different now. This is a different kind of Jesus. One of the other, I just think this is kind of funny. One of the other things is, one of the theories about people seeing a risen Jesus was he's a ghost.
Yeah.
And so the proof of him is touch my wounds, because ghosts don't have flesh and wounds.
Right. There's nothing to touch.
Right. And so that's another kind of aspect of what John is trying to do here. He's trying to insist, and this is really, really important. This has affected, I mean, like, people have gone to war over this idea. Inappropriately, but people have gone to war over this idea. Jesus is fully human and fully divine, and John, especially in his gospel, is the one who insists upon that by saying Jesus is risen and also is wounded, and also has flesh and blood, and the proof of his deityness is the woundedness. Yeah. So, and again, so there's a scene in Ghostbusters where they're fighting the big bad villain, and the villain asks, "Are you a god?" to the Ghostbusters, and Ray, who is their kind of representative, he says, "No," and she says, "Then die," and then attacks them. If you're not a god, then die. That's kind of what you would expect, right? Like, if you're asking for evidence of a god, then demonstrate your power.
That's spot on analogy right there.
Yeah.
So and that's why I think it's so remarkable that John presents Jesus, "Are you a god?" and his evidence is, "I died."
Yeah, look at my humanness.
Yeah.
Look what I did for you. Which is a profound statement for a god to make to his creation, you know? So I want to talk about, and we're in these final moments, I want to ask you, where does your faith come from? Because I think a lot of Christians put way too much emphasis on this idea of proof and like making apologetic arguments and like philosophically working it out and making it a math problem, where does your faith come from? What has brought you here to this church and this couch and being willing to talk openly about your belief? Like where did it start? How did you get here?
For me, I mean, some of you might know my story from different live shows that I've been on, but my faith came from me being at some of the darkest moments of my life and being able to come out of that. And also the openness of this church in the sense of me being able to question certain things, and Chris in particular not shutting down my questioning and actually accepting my questioning, especially my hesitation at the beginning, where I would ask questions of, if God is so merciful, then why is there so much death, destruction, and hate everywhere in the world? But then I know, through embracing my faith, I found a lot of love. I found love internally in myself, but I also found ways to express that love to those around me and just be a better human being and a better person. So I'd say that's where my faith comes into play, specifically when it comes to how I've kind of transitioned into this church and become a member. So
I grew up in the church, so it always was in me a little bit, and I had to take a credit in college for, I don't remember what it was, all-inclusiveness or something, and I did world religions. Let me tell you, that was pretty humbling in so many ways. And the guy that we had was a little old Baptist minister teaching, and he did not play favorites. He actually demanded that you learn. Most of our tests were not like multiple choice, easy peasy stuff. Oh no, you had to explain the theology, not just of Christianity. We did the entire bit. I mean, like Eastern culture, Western culture, because then you broke down Christianity a little bit more into some of the little denomination, like Methodist versus Baptist versus a little bit.
You went to school when they actually made you think about things.
Oh my gosh. And we had to, you had to do a project where you went to, and you were supposed to pick not your own faith. I don't know how they would really even know that, but like you had to step out of your box and go somewhere and like spend the day or go to a service. And
that was a lot of my chaplain training. I had to go to, I went to a Hispanic service that was Christian because I was Christian and I am. But then we also we went to a giant mosque in Tampa for Ramadan and interviewed the imam and also the several female leaders who were like checking him a lot about, well, hold on, well, that's not necessarily. It was a little glimpse. It was a little glimpse into the dynamics of how that works. He was very young. He was like obviously new, but there's something about being exposed to other faiths and other ideas and other philosophies.
It really solidified for me that like this is where I stand, because there were moments where I would be studying some of these other things or hearing some other things, and I was like, well, that actually makes a lot of sense. I kind of like that. Yeah. But there would always be something that didn't work out, that was missing, that it didn't work for me. It didn't speak to me. It would let me down, like it didn't. The resurrection that I've always known in the stories as a kid, like that was always the big thing. And a lot of the other religions, as I was studying them and getting into it, like there would always be something that it was like, yeah, but they don't have that. Yeah. Again, that humanity, that woundedness is your, like,
I've often said, like, I would be a universalist pastor. I would be a Unitarian Universalist pastor, if it weren't for my desperate need for the death and resurrection of the Christ. Like, I need a God who went to the cross. It's kind of the only way I can really make sense of it, and it doesn't make sense. So I am not claiming that it does, and anyone who I get really tired of this mathematical algorithmic theology that claims it can prove everything. Like, no, you can't. The Bible contradicts itself. Stop doing that. It is a matter of faith. It really, really, really is. Which is why I'm okay with people approaching God from other faith perspectives too. Like I
Yeah, you were okay from that from the beginning for me. I mean, I was, you know.
Like, I have no doubt that God is at work in every single person's life. Like, I have no doubt. But I need the death and resurrection of Jesus. It is fundamental to my understanding of who God is and how I relate to God. And that's why I'm a United Methodist pastor rather than a Unitarian pastor, you know? But I also don't fault other people who approach God and encounter God in a different way, because I actually do have faith in Jesus as the perfect lamb, as the judge and the sacrifice all at the same time. I can't imagine that Jesus is such a sorry, we're on the Kindred live show, so I can't say that word. That God is such a jerk that he's willing to submit people to eternal torture based on some kind of arbitrary distinct, like, that's insane to me. My encounter with God has been one of ultimate grace, of ultimate like engagement, and like, I'm willing to meet you where you are and bring you along. And a big piece of that for me is the cross, is the death and the resurrection. And even in this story, doubting Thomas, he doesn't go, shame on you for not believing. He says, here, then come along. Then here, put your hand in my side.
He welcomes him.
You need to know. I get it. You need to know. I get it. Here. Like, and that's how God treated me. Like, all right, I get it. You needed to know. You need to know. Here's how I'm going to show you.
On that note, I think that there's two sides to that coin. The best relationship I have with it. So my dad got really sick when I was a kid and should have died. He did not. He is still alive today. I know at least 3 other people that have had a similar story to mine. Their dad did not live. Their struggle is very different than mine.
Yeah. And the only way I can make sense of that, like why him and not mine?
Right.
The only way I can make sense of that is a God on a cross. That's it is a, yep, I understand the world I made has oftentimes arbitrary suffering. I understand. I promise there's something bigger. I promise there's something deeper going on. And as proof of that, quote unquote,
right.
I'm going to join you. I will be with you on the cross. I will be there. I promise I promise so hard that it's worth it, that I'll do this with you. Even though there is no, like, sin or punishment for God, it is this, like, all right, I believe so much in the redemption, and I want this in you so hard that I'll suffer alongside you, so that you can know for a fact, the language gets muddied because my whole point is it's not a fact. It is faith.
Right.
That you can know and put your faith confidently in the fact that redemption from suffering and evil is my game. That's what I do. That's who I am, Right. Like, and I need a God on a cross because of that.
I just like to make the point, and that was why I said that, it's okay to be in the doubting Thomas moment.
Yeah.
To have God having his arms open saying, it's okay that you're struggling with that. I'll be here when you're ready.
Right.
You know, like, that's...
Yeah. There's
not a lot of other things that have that, I think.
Yeah. All right, we're about out of time. You got final thoughts?
No, I'm dead set on what you guys are saying. I agree with it, and I think when I talk about all the death and suffering, definitely the story of Jesus Christ is within itself just shows you the humanity that the world could have.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah. We can choose heaven.
Yeah.
We can choose heaven. All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.